Our next speaker, Vladimir, are you here?
Hey there.
Hi.
How are you?
We can hear you. I'm good. I'm good. I'm not Pep, but I'm almost good. Yeah. Let's get your slides up as well.
All right.
Awesome. Try clicking as well. Can you click
Yeah.
the next one? Yeah, works. Nice. I'll jump off. You can start.
All right. Thank you very much. So, hello, everybody. My name is Vlad Blagojevic. I'm a co-founder together with Andrei Zinkiewicz. You might know I'm a co-founder of Full Funnel. Full Funnel is a marketing consulting and training agency, company. And we work with brands, B2B tech brands with, let's say, deal sizes 5-figure above, let's say 50K above, where there's usually some complexity in sales, multiple buyers, long and complex sales cycles. And we help them implement account-based marketing to generate demand and land opportunities. And today, what I want to share with you is just our story of what works for us in 2023 and how we did it all with basically a team of two. So the bit of kind of a background about our company just started 2 years ago, back in September 2020. Since then, the two of us essentially built out this demand generation engine that generated more than 200 sales qualified opportunities. We were talking about 5-figure opportunities, bunch of subscribers to our newsletter, our online events. We've been invited to many, leading conferences, podcasts, being published on, amongst others, also a CXL from PIP, and build our LinkedIn followers. And the nice thing about the topic today, which is about how we do more with less, we did it all basically with zero marketing budget and a team of two. So how did we do it? The next 20 minutes, I want to share with you a bit of a reflection what we see happening in 2023. We are also selling to marketers, which is the topic of today. 6 things that we do, kind of playbooks that work for us in 2023, and how we do it all with a team of two. So I know you've heard a lot about this already, so I'm just going to reflect quickly on what has changed, what is different in 2023. I mean, if you're selling 5+ figure deals, you always had to deal with long, complex buying process, multiple buyers. But 2023 is even worse because, in the attempt to curb an unnecessary spending, companies are introducing maybe new other people in the approval process, or new stages in the approval process, making it all the more complex. And if you're selling to marketers, you know that there is an abundance of content when it comes to marketing. And so recently I spoke to a VP of marketing of a large company, and she mentioned that she actually purchased one of our courses just to vet us as a vendor, right? So they expect essentially top-notch expert content, and they use it to evaluate their vendors. And at the same time, everybody seems to be doubling down on kind of short-term demand capture, whether that's search channels, outbound motion, whatever it is. But in these times, the demand is actually shrinking. So there is actually more competition for a smaller pie. And at the same time, you might have smaller budgets, but if you don't have, and if you're selling to marketing teams, then maybe their budgets have been reduced. So how do you do, what works still in this environment? And the way that I organize is kind of 3 parts: foundation, what works for us to generate demand, and how we actually accelerate and capture the demand that we generated. So the foundation, I think we all heard do more with less, but what does it really mean? Like for us, what it means, first of all, it means really getting precise about your ICP. And when I talk about ICP, what really changed it for us is really studying our won and lost deals. So let's say your 5 largest won deals and 5 fastest won deals, but also 5 largest lost deals, and figuring out the specific characteristic criteria that you can use to really narrow down on the ICP. So we have identified like 20, 30 different criteria that we use to really narrow down. Now, once you narrow down on your ICP like that, it also helps because you can narrow down also on the channels, content, campaigns that actually work, like the 20-80 rule, 20% of stuff that gives 80% of results. So this is something that at the beginning, as we started, there were some kind of easy wins, and then the growth slowed down, and that's where we actually decided to really dig deeper and understand our ICP even better. And this is an ongoing process. We review our ICP every quarter, and because it's evolving, right? Different things are happening in the market, but also you're evolving as a brand. So it's really important to keep this up to date. The next thing is all about, again, talking about foundations, is about selling the way that your customers buy. And this is a diagram of how we see a lot of companies market today. Essentially, without going into too many details here, it's focused on demand capture. Like what goes for demand generation, a lot of companies is essentially sending cold traffic, whether that's via outbound motion, whether that's via some paid, to book a demo. Maybe there is a bit of quote unquote nurturing, like maybe they will first promote some sort of gated content, then there will be a few step nurture, and then sales. That lead will be passed on to sales. And the problem with that, there's multiple problems with that. Of course, not everybody is in the market is buying, so you're kind of wasting a lot of your budget and efforts on let's say 97% or whatever that is of people who are not buying. But also, if all you do is demand capture, you're also, especially when it comes to bigger deals, 5-figure plus deals, you're usually coming too late to the party, right? So you're there. They may take you into consideration set, but often there will be other vendors who had the chance to position themselves over time to the buyers. So you are, as a consequence, have a lower chance of getting that deal. And also, simply because you're doing this just demand capture, you're very, very often perceived as one of many, a commodity. And with that commodity positioning, again, you will have lower win rates, you will have very high acquisition cost, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that today, that means, with the demand that is going down, everybody fighting for a smaller piece of the pie or a smaller pie, this just looks even worse. So we actually did a study of how our buyers buy, and I plotted out an actual example of a buying process. Now, buying process, as far as we know, right? As far as we were aware of that, because of course you're only seeing a piece of the puzzle. There's so many, the buyer process doesn't start with a click on your website. So if all you're doing is just looking at the analytics, you're probably seeing, 5%, 3% of the buying process. So the only way for you to really figure that out is to go and interview your buyers and really start understanding the complete buying process. Now, this was just an example, a concrete example of, I think it was 45 steps or something that we were aware of. So kind of the takeaway here is narrow down the ICP and then understand how they buy, who is involved, how, where they hang out, how they discover and evaluate vendors like you. It's usually it's not, via Google searches or stuff. It's usually via communities. It's, just asking their peers, and how do they then evaluate, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding the full buying process and then building your go-to-market strategy and your marketing and sales process based on the way that actually your best customers buy. That was the foundation. So let me share a few things that we do to generate awareness and demand. Now, we have chosen, I think if you want to do a lot of content, a lot of activities, I think it's, and you don't have a lot of resources, I think one of the things to nail as soon as you can is your core content pillar. What is a core content pillar? Essentially is where you're focused on creating new content, and then out of that, you're repurposing for other channels, other formats, etc., etc. For us, like maybe Chris Walker. Probably most of you know Chris Walker. He's famous for his videos and his podcast. So his content pillar is his podcast, and he derives a lot of the other content from there. For us, actually, our core content pillar is LinkedIn, and the reason why we chose LinkedIn is because of the fast feedback. You have an immediate feedback of what works and what doesn't work. Now, it's actually easier for us to create a piece of content for LinkedIn, LinkedIn post essentially, than it is to create, a full article, whatever. And you have an immediate feedback, what works, what doesn't work. So you can kind of use that as a testing ground to see what resonates better with the audience. But in addition, it's a social network, and you can have conversations with people that are engaging with your content or otherwise with your target audience. You can get that additional feedback. And of course, you can use that to generate sales opportunities, which at the end, it's what this is all about. Now, it's not coincidence that also LinkedIn is the channel that drives most of our inbound pipeline. And the other lesson here that I wanted to share with you, or another thing that we figured out along the way, is that it's really important, especially if you're in competitive space like we are, to do things differently. And when we talk about awareness generation, if you're talking about, awareness creation, demand generation, if you're talking about content, it's really important for your content to stand out. So, for example, when we launched our podcast, we did what everybody does, like you do podcast interview, then you do some clips, you share it out on LinkedIn, etc. But we soon realized that we are doing the same things that everybody else was doing, and that how many people, beyond just consuming that little clip and reading your post, how many actually go through and click and actually listen to your podcast. So we decided to turn it around and turn our podcast into a community event where we invite our community. They participate, they can ask, they get access. So for example, we did a live podcast with Pip where we did message breakdowns, tear downs, I'm sorry, but Pip did them. And that was just an amazing experience. It was completely different, passively listening to somebody speak, have a conversation on a podcast. So this has worked really well. Like we have sometimes hundreds of people participating actively. It's extremely engaged, right? So it's like an event. Another example is when it comes to, doing things differently in your content. One thing to understand, and as I mentioned, like especially if you're selling to marketers, generally buyers, will use your content to evaluate you, right? So content, you don't necessarily have to think about content as a traffic or a lead generation tool. You can think of it as a branding tool, right? If somebody reads that piece of content, are you communicating, are you positioning yourself essentially the way you want to position yourself? So like I mentioned, that VP of marketing, she said literally, like, I bought your course because I wanted to check you out. And that's what happens. Like, for example, on our website, we have a few pieces of content. We don't have so much. So there we really don't focus on the volume. We focus on the quality. But all the content that we have is at least 5K, words, 5,000 words. These are in-depth step-by-step guides and frameworks that we share, or case studies. Again, not like a typical case study, but again, like 3,000-4,000 words, detailed behind the scenes, step by step, revealing everything, type of content, right? And similarly also for our webinars, right? A lot of companies do webinars, unfortunately, kind of mask product pitch as an educational webinar. You have a lot of that, unfortunately, going on in B2B. But when we decided to focus our webinars, on the one hand, on basically going again into all the details, revealing everything, but also making them as interactive as possible. For example, we did live campaigns, an outreach, and actually generating an opportunity during one of our webinars. Just, engaging the audience. For example, we did a webinar about LinkedIn, and then we actually posted as a community, or, the attendees actually created a LinkedIn post and shared it. And so, making them engaging. Again, it's about being different, and it is about using your content as a branding tool, not necessarily as a lead generation tool. So The third part is about accelerating demand. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, essentially, all that demand generation that you're doing is creating a pool of engaged accounts. And the accounts that are ready to buy, or the buyers that are ready to buy, they're going to reach out to you. They're smart people. They will find that, demo or whatever request or whatever form you have on your website, and they know how to book a call with you. So this is all about, like, what do you do with the others? And it's all about actually doing more with less, like not leaving any money on the table, right? So here's a couple of things that we are doing. It's not everything. We didn't have the time. So a couple of things that work really well for us. Well, first of all, you need some sort of data to know which accounts are being engaged and, showing intent based on all the work that you've done for your demand generation. So this is a screenshot from Albacross. It's just a tool that we use to identify visitors, like account visiting your website. There are many tools like that. And so now we know which accounts we can focus on and try to accelerate that demand and generate an opportunity. You can also look at, for example, engagement on social. Like I mentioned, we do a lot of LinkedIn, so you can look at, for example, the buyers that are being engaged with content on LinkedIn, etc. And then the last step that I wanted to share here is, like, okay, so what do you do with them? And there's different things that you can do, but as we were speaking about content, I just wanted to share with you how we use content to actually activate those accounts and accelerate that demand and generate sales opportunities. So what it's, like I mentioned, really cool about a platform like LinkedIn is that you can have a two-way conversation. So a conversation that may start, or maybe it's not even a conversation, engagement starts on around maybe a content that we shared. Now, based on that engagement, thanks a lot for the reaction, I can now take the next step. Now, I'm not going to pitch right away because there was no buying signal, but I might offer another piece of content, or maybe I can start a conversation or ask a question about it, right? So in this case, I'm using, a case study to start driving a demand. And actually, because this was somebody who was already very engaged over time, the demand was built, so I didn't really have to, continue that. But actually, using additional content is a way to continue that conversation and education, add new touch points, basically. Now, you can also use content collaborations. This is another tool that works really well. So in this case, what I'm showing is just, okay, a conversation that started in the comments. We went into the inbox and I invited this gentleman on our podcast where we chatted about their challenges, their priorities. And this gave me enough insight, of course, to know that they were actually in a buying mode. They didn't say that to me before I had that conversation. So that conversation allowed me to see whether whether there was a need. And in this case, it was a need, and opportunity was generated. So the last part here is content hubs. It's something that we use often, essentially sharing specific content for target accounts or after specific events, etc., and having content analytics. That what that means is sharing kind of middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel content, and checking the analytics and using that as an additional source of intent data that you can run basically very personalized, or your sales team can run very personalized follow-ups, timely and personalized follow-ups. That works really, really well. So just what I promised as well, to wrap it up with sharing, like, how do we do all of these things with a team of two? And I only shared with you a piece of the puzzle. So we do a lot more. We do a number of daily activities on, we have our own community. We have our daily LinkedIn, Twitter. We actually have 2 newsletters weekly, do live podcasts, monthly webinars. We have a big summit actually coming up next week, Full Funnel B2B Marketing Summit. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, this is like our commitment. This is what we say, okay, this is, we need to make this happen. Of course, we didn't start with the full picture. We started gradually and built over time, but it was always like, okay, how can we focus on operationalizing? How can we make this repeatable? So in other words, not perfection, but perfection over time, like improving over time, making sure that we get things out, learn from the market, and then improve. And by doing it like this, you create a kind of a I see you everywhere effect in the market, right? This is what people often tell us, like, I see you guys everywhere, right? Kind of a never stop nurturing effect that you create. And of course, a lot of repurposing. I don't have the time to go into details, but essentially, like a lot of stuff that we create, you know, because we know what works based on LinkedIn feedback. Now we can like dive deeper in our articles or webinars or whatever other piece of content we do, longer form content. Now it's kind of already proven, right? So we do a lot of repurposing. And basically, I think 80% of content that we put out there is somehow repurposed based on, you know, whether it's LinkedIn or other sources. And then also, of course, distribution, because what is content worth if, you know, people don't see it, if your target buyers don't see it? And it takes time, right? This is just an example, a snapshot until the last quarter last year. So maybe it's going to look differently after the first quarter this year. But essentially, what I wanted to share with this is that, okay, after the easy wins, what happened? There was a dip. And it's usually during that dip that a lot of people give up. We actually took severe salary cuts for a while, you know, kept investing more than half of our time in, you know, doing all these activities. And we only, like, after the 6 quarters or so, we really saw the needle moving, and we started to see the kind of the hockey effects there. And but the good news, on the other hand, is that the results do compound. So like our last quarter was approximately the sum of the first 6 quarters. So that's a kind of the good news. And that's it. So I just wanted to leave you with this takeaway. So things that work for us well is really focusing down and always asking yourself, okay, what is working, what's not working, what should we be doubling down on, and like always looking for 80-20, creating this I see you everywhere, always on demand gen machine by doing, again, 20-80, right? Focusing a lot on repurposing and distribution. And then also not leaving any money on table, like using essentially account-based marketing to accelerate that demand and capture more opportunities like that. So that's it from me. Carl, if you want to ask some questions.
Yeah. So when you had that slump you showed 2021 quarter three, what did you do? Did you like just made more content and waited aggressively and took salary cuts and just pushed it through, or did you use that intent data to do some outbounding? And how did you like manage to pay the bills?
Yeah.
What was the actions?
So, I mean, like we are a very, very lean team, so that wasn't so difficult to survive. So yes, we did take salary cuts the whole first year, including that quarter, right? But of course, we were using that also to see whether are we seeing growth, are we not seeing growth. So essentially, we didn't change much in our strategy. We kept on doing, like we knew, we saw the early signals, we saw everything was pointing in the right direction. Pipeline was, of course, much bigger, so there is always a lag. So I think kind of the key point maybe is looking at the early signals and leading indicators, not just at the revenue, right? A bit trusting the process as well. And then, yes, of course, there are always things that you can do on the short term to accelerate. So I think that was a time that we launched, specific outreach where we did, again, it was like ABM. So we were, doing co-creation, we were inviting people. So the one example that I shared where I invited the gentleman, the CEO, to our podcast, etc., that was like one of the actions that we took at that time to kind of add a bit more pipeline, but we didn't change that much, to be honest.
Got it. So that would be your advice to current companies as well. Like if the budgets are thin or pipelines are dry, then just put some ABM and stuff into the mix. And
yeah, I mean, if you have been doing demand generation so far, if you have been really educating your market, my advice would be that probably the easiest win is to identify those accounts that are engaging, define some sort of an engagement threshold, define, engagement, let's say an intent threshold. For example, it's not the same if somebody comes to your website and reads a blog for, a couple of minutes versus an account where you have 3 people, scouring through your, product pages and your pricing page, etc. Right? So that's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And also, of course, like I said at the beginning, like really understanding your ICP, so that out of all of those accounts that are engaging, you know which one you can actually realistically close right now. Because maybe if you are, depending on your stage and where you are, you might not be able to close the apples of this world, right? So you may
Mm-hmm.
have to like focus on those that can actually have a chance to close.
Awesome, awesome. And how much time and money are you putting behind this content distribution at the moment?
Yeah, so most of this is organic, like, well, 99% I would say is organic. We are just doing paid some experiments, but really it's all
Mm-hmm.
organic. And it's just a continuous, like, probably we are putting in around, so from the two founders, so we have, other people helping, but let's say from the two founders in this case, we are putting in 30 to 50% of our time into this. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vladimir. Our time is up here,
Yeah.
I
You're
think.
very welcome. Have
Yeah,
fun.
shout out your LinkedIn as well for people to follow you.
Absolutely. You should I? Yeah, I'll drop the link.
Yeah,
So yeah, we are posting every day. You can always reach out to me, ask any question, and be happy to chat.
yeah, awesome. Bye.
Thank you.